Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal here on Potomac Watch with Alicia Finley and Kate O'Dell. We're talking about the big vote in the House in support of a bill that would force the sale of TikTok from Chinese company ByteDance. I have to say, Kate, my own journey on this bill has taken a while. I was skeptical of this kind of legislation or anything that could force a sale for free market reasons. I don't like government to do that typically because we believe in freedom. We believe in adults making contracts and investments and so on. But over time, I became persuaded by just the compilation of disclosures about the degree to which the solutions TikTok offered, as Alicia described before, just really don't work. And you just can't trust the Chinese Communist Party, notwithstanding their assertions about their great intentions. We know, for example, that a Google AI official was recently arrested for spying for China. Not a good thing, not a good omen. And then just the degree to which the algorithms that TikTok uses seem to be skewed often to anti-American themes or anti-American interests. For example, you can't find as many easily get access to news about Hong Kong protests for democracy or forced labor in Xinjiang province with the Uyghurs. And you can find none of that, of course, in China. And Facebook is banned in China. Google doesn't operate in China. And yet the Chinese expect to have impunity in operating in the United States.
Right. I mean, the political management of capital in this manner is obviously a last resort and not something we would have preferred to have done. But I think it's a testament to, like you described, the extent of the disclosures and the risk and just the larger ideological nature of the Chinese Communist Party and how aggressively they are trying to influence and surveil the United States in various ways to influence our society in directions they prefer. I mean, an example I used on this podcast is one concern about TikTok has been, if there's a crisis in the Pacific and the Chinese Communist Party is able to use TikTok to gin up Americans to turn Congress in their favor, to stay out, to not bother and intervene in a Pacific crisis. There are real risks here that I think are the reasons that eventually Congress was forced to act. And it's better that they acted in this narrowly tailored fashion after several iterations and attempts to come up with a solution.
So, a big vote. What do we expect to happen here in the Senate? Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, issued a statement saying briefly, just one sentence, saying the Senate will review the House bill, but no promises on how it will consider it or when. There are some vocal opponents of the House bill, namely Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, Libertarian. Some others have expressed at least some reservations, perhaps, about the bill. They said they'll review it, which is fair enough. What do you think, Alicia?
Well, I think the Democrats are seriously worried about the political implications. One, they do want to use TikTok. You saw that Joe Biden finally got a TikTok account.
But he says he'll sign this bill.
Right. Well, he said he'd sign it, but he actually hasn't really used the bully pulpit in supporting it.
But does he use the bully pulpit on
for anything? Well, for electric vehicles, he certainly does.
Okay.
I think he's a little, in his campaign staff is a little bit ambivalent about it, in part because they know, one, it'll anger their progressive base, and two, they do plan to use it to target voters and motivate them to come out in November. And so maybe the Senate will consider it, and maybe they'll consider it after the election. On the right, my sources say that most senators are pretty supportive of it. There is the Rand Paul who makes a kind of a strange First Amendment argument that this is silencing American users. Again, as Mike Gallagher mentioned, it doesn't really discriminate on viewpoint or content. It's just based on the control of the Chinese company, and they can divest, and ByteDance can divest.
This isn't a viewpoint control bill at all.
No, and in fact, I would argue it's just the opposite in terms of that the Chinese government right now can and is probably suppressing different speech, American speech, and is essentially doing what the Biden administration was found to have been doing with the COVID lockdowns and all of that, suppressing different viewpoints, the conservative viewpoints.
Lobbying some of the platform.
We would never know, or we can't see what's going on behind the scenes in China and what their engineers are doing. Because first of all, the First Amendment doesn't apply to the Chinese government. And second of all, you can't sue the Chinese government for that. So you'd never be able to get to legal discovery and to actually show all this. But for conservatives who are concerned about free speech, I think this is actually a bill that would promote free speech.
All right, we're going to go to break. And when we come back, more on the vote in the House on TikTok. Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Alicia Finley and Kate Odell. We're talking about the big House vote on a bill on TikTok. Kate, let's take up the Donald Trump question. Donald Trump, of course, and his administration famously tried to force ByteDance to divest itself of TikTok. Some buyers were even entertained for that, including, I think, Oracle was one of the names that was mentioned, the U.S. giant software firm. But that ran aground in the courts. So now, as he's running for re-election, and President Biden has said he would sign this bipartisan House bill, Donald Trump says, oh, no. I like TikTok. A lot of Americans like TikTok. The question becomes, what accounts for the big Trump switcheroo here? And some people say it's related to campaign donations from Jeff Yass, who's a big investor. He's generally a great source for good, a Republican donor, huge supporter of school choice, Susquehanna Capital owner. But he's also a big investor in TikTok and has opposed this legislation. I don't have any evidence that that is in fact the case, but others suggest that this is all about the youth vote and Trump just trying to cater to young people and take some of those voters away from Biden. What do you think?
Well, okay, so the Trumpologists will tell you that if you follow Trump's remarks closely, such as what he said about TikTok earlier this week on Squawk Box on CNBC, they're just merely incomprehensible, and that he is not necessarily going to go at this bill with the same ferocity that he did, for instance, like the border deal, which he, set out to kill. But I think there are a couple things that are driving his turn against the deal. I mean, one is just pure politics that, he perhaps doesn't want Biden to get credit for this after he tried to do it. I do think that the American investors in TikTok who don't want it banned is having some effect. But I also have seen just an odd outbreak of moral equivalence on the right that I think there's some capitalizing on American distaste for big tech generally and some real false equivalence between Facebook and the Chinese Communist Party. And so I do think there is some concern that an element of the right thinks Facebook is just as bad as, again, a foreign adversary who controls a major platform.
Trump was explicit on the point, Kate. He said, if you block TikTok in the United States, then the big winner will be Meta, which is Facebook's owner, and Meta is an enemy of the people or something to the equivalent of that. And I guess that goes back to the fact that Meta blocked Trump after the January 6, 2021 riot. And the Zuckerbucks, named after the CEO of Facebook, had spent a lot of money on vote registration in swing states, and Trump still blames him for his defeat.
Yeah, but I think we should dispense with that equivalence pretty quickly. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg...
I'm not saying there's any equivalence. Don't get me wrong. I know. I'm just saying that Trump has said that explicitly.
Trump says that, but I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, again, I'm concerned that the right has lost its ability to make these distinctions in some corners because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have a rocket force. He's not, like the Chinese Communist Party amassing military power to use against the United States. I mean, it's surprising to me that this has gained so much traction and it has in certain corners been presented as, a project of the deep state and the intel community to fool everybody. And it does risk that the United States will struggle to rally behind a common security purpose.
Yeah, this gets to some of the incoherence that we see intellectually on the right, Alicia. There's no question. China said in reaction to the House vote, well, this could redound to the detriment of the United States, could boomerang on the United States without, I guess, explaining how it would do that. But of course, if the Chinese really wanted to reduce the suspicion in the United States about what China's up to. Maybe stop recruiting spies at Google AI. Maybe stop getting into my emails, just to be personal about it. Maybe don't block U.S. platforms in China. I mean, there are alternatives here.
Right. Repeal their 2017, and then actually they amended it again 2021 law that requires private companies in China basically do the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that is actually the issue here. There is a concern that they will retaliate against American companies for this. You saw that after Biden administration imposed export controls on U.S. chips. Well, what did they do? Retaliate against Micron Technologies, and they had a major presence in China. And so China basically passed law and said, for national security reasons, Micron chips will not be allowed in critical infrastructure. And so the Chinese do have a history of retaliating against companies doing business in the country. And I think we probably can expect that. But U.S. businesses are already starting to try to get out of China for these very reasons.
Diversify
their supply chains, but also just even shift IP out of the country because they are seeing these risks.
All right. This is a fascinating turn of events. Congress doesn't do a hell of a lot these days. And so this House vote was a real anomaly and suggests, I think, large sentiment in Congress of concern for China and TikTok and the implications of its influence on American life. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Alicia. We're here every day on Potomac Watch. So please join us tomorrow and every day. Thanks for listening.